Guys, I'm back with another NaNoWriMo themed video. I have my coffee here. I promise not to scare you with spilling it. I know I tend to flail when I talk and move my arms around, so I'm going to try not to do that. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit today about this idea of developing good habits as an editor, as a freelance editor specifically. And this really came about from a discussion in one of my classes. I had my last class last week. It was a couple days ago at the University of Chicago Graham School. And basically I'm pursuing my editing certificate through the University of Chicago Graham School. And I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but anyway. So I finished my last class for intermediate fiction editing, which was really, really great. I really enjoyed the teacher. I enjoyed the class, the setup, and everything. It was definitely more challenging, obviously, than the beginner's manuscript editing class, but I feel like I learned a lot and I enjoyed it. But anyway, so the last class we were talking about this idea of developing good habits. And so I kind of wanted to share with you guys a little bit of what I learned from that class and a little bit of what I've learned along the way. Some of my tips may seem really simple, and I know that can be frustrating sometimes when you're watching something that you're trying to learn from and it seems like, I don't know, like it's watered down or not the whole truth. But what I want to share with you is genuinely some of the most important foundational truths that I found in my business. And it's something that I think is true of a lot of editors after talking to other people in my class. I really think it's something that is important for any editor and honestly any freelancer. So keep that in mind. And yeah, we'll just get started. I have timestamps down below if you want to jump ahead to what you're interested in. And yeah, let's do it. So my first tip for developing good habits as a freelance editor is to communicate. This is something that is true of any business, but I'm going to tell you why it's so important for freelance editors. First of all, you need to communicate with your managing editor, your point of contact, whether it's your author or client that you're working with. Make sure that you are communicating your expectations and keep that person informed generally on whether or not you are on track of a project. At the first hint of a mismatch of expectations, let that person know. Reach out to the person paying you and let that person know what's going on. Discuss your concerns. I think often editors are afraid to approach authors because, I mean, any freelancer is afraid to approach a client because it can seem like this daunting task. Like, you don't want to disappoint anyone. And if you're anything like me, you're probably a perfectionist, and the idea of missing a deadline is just unfathomable. But also the idea of letting anyone down, it can be, I don't know, it can be easy to kind of push that aside. But I would encourage you not to do that. This happened to me very recently. I was editing a wonderful book from a fellow booktuber who I really, really like a lot. And I was editing her book and I realized that I had overbooked. Actually, it was a client snowball effect where basically something wasn't right on their end. But anyway, it fell on me and I realized that I would be rushing through this project unless I reached out to her and said, hey, is there any way you'd be okay with me extending this deadline so that I can give your book the full attention it deserves? This is the first time I've ever really had to do that, and it was a little bit scary, but it's like, I don't know why I think authors are not going to be receptive of that. It's really, especially independent authors, they're really, really understanding, and I don't think that we should run our businesses, speaking to editors now, with the assumption that every author is going to be cool with that. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I do think it's important to know that communication goes a long way, and an author would appreciate you communicating and saying, hey, I may be rushing through this. Is it possible to make X, Y, and Z happen? That author may appreciate that more than if you just sort of dodged it out of fear and then when it comes time to turn in the project, you're failing at that expectation. Discuss your concerns. Authors are not scary monsters. They are real people, they're empathetic, they're understanding, and a lot of the businesses I've worked with and editorial agencies are like that as well. Publishers are a little bit scarier, they're a little bit more on a specific timeline, but it's still important to discuss your concerns with your point of contact. The second tip is to record your experience. This is something that I have never done, and so I'm talking about it with you now because somebody mentioned it in my class when we were discussing the idea of developing good habits. And I just thought it was brilliant. I'm going to start doing it from now on. Basically, at the end of the project, you check the reality versus the estimate. So when it comes time to accept or reject another project that's kind of similar, you have a clear idea of what to expect. You keep a record for assessing a project or creating an estimate, and it's such a helpful idea. Otherwise, if you're good and busy, you will find yourself doing this in a mild panic late at night in the face of a potentially great new author or client. Number 3 is tracking, and this is probably my most helpful practical tip for freelance editors. Basically, you want to monitor how you're working and basically your speed, your pace. Keep track of your project, whether it's every 10 pages or every chapter, or once you're 10% of the way through your project. Check your project by figuring page versus hour or word versus hour. This is really helpful for creating estimates down the line. It's also helpful so that you don't end up working every single weekend and every single evening because you're able to manage your time better. Estimate how much time you will need, but also set aside time for managing the project outside of editing. So, jumping on phone calls, emails, file cleanup, whatever else that may entail. Take the time to measure your progress. Also, consider if the project is living up to the publisher's expectations. Number 4, last but not least, is to visualize. We've kind of already talked about this, but this is the idea of looking at your project realistically. I have a really hard time with this. I'm just gonna go ahead and admit it right now, but I've gotten better because I'm able to visualize my month, visualize my week, and then visualize my day to day. I find that it's really helpful to look at it from those 3 angles. This gets tricky when you're having to schedule out projects months in advance, and it's really easy to overbook yourself or underestimate how much time it's going to take you to do something. Visualizing your time in the context of monthly, weekly, daily is really a helpful way to combat that fear. For instance, I know that I wanted to post a video every single day in November, and so knowing that and knowing that my time was going to be going to that, I was very selective with the kind of projects that I was going to take on in November. I'm still extremely busy and probably took on too much, but I was able to push some things to December, knowing that I had such a full plate in November. And this is kind of a luxury of freelancing. Sometimes it's not always a luxury because it is feast or famine. That's sort of how freelancing works. But if you can look at your professional life, your personal life, and kind of move things around based on your month as a whole, and then your week, and then your day to day, it really does help. Sometimes it's a matter of not just looking at time-consuming projects, but also projects that take a lot of energy, and sort of scheduling your day that way. For instance, I know that I do my best creative work towards the end of the day. I do more technical editing projects at the beginning of the day, and towards the end of the day, I do more manuscript evaluation, developmental editing type projects. That's just the way my brain works, and I've had years to kind of figure that out. But that's one way to kind of visualize your day to day. Start thinking about how you structure your day, how you're using your brain to the best of its ability. If I look ahead to the beginning of the week and see that I have 3 doctor's appointments, which happened 2 weeks ago, I'm able to figure out how to schedule my week better. I'm just more equipped in that sense. So anyway, my camera battery is blinking at me right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in a comment down below how you manage your day. If you're a freelancer or freelance editor, I'd love to know, or if you have any helpful tips, because I'm constantly looking to grow in this area. Like I said, some of the things on here are things that I hope to implement in the future. And yeah, I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.